Today we'll be continuing the Arab-UN relations with special emphasis to special files, particularly Syria, as the Geneva talks are continuing on, and of course as the trilateral meeting that took place in Tunisia concerning Libya just finished with some 6 important points. More other files, of course, would be opened, but the main would be the continuation of our file, the UN-Arab relations. Of course, there is a much anticipated meeting between Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry in the United States, preparing the ground for another important meeting that will take place in March between President Sisi and President Trump. We'll be speaking about all that and more in our episode. Before we delve into our discussion, let's first have a quick look on the news of this week and we'll come back.
The Joint Committee for Interreligious Dialogue between Al-Azhar and the Vatican concluded its 2-day meetings at Al-Azhar headquarters. Al-Azhar Deputy Dr. Abbas Shuman and President of the Pontifical Council for the Interreligious Dialogue, Cardinal Jean-Louis Tourim, have inaugurated the meeting. Shuman welcomed the cooperation between the two religious institutions to correct distorted religious concepts and confront extremism. He hailed cooperation between the Vatican and spreading moderate thinking, stressing significance of the role played by Al-Azhar in such a domain. He pointed out to Al-Azhar's cooperation with governments to combat poverty and illiteracy to protect youth from extremism. Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry received the top Palestinian negotiator and executive secretary of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, Saeb Uraiqat, currently visiting Egypt, and discussed the recent developments in the Middle East peace process. Uraiqat expressed his appreciation to Egypt's historic role in supporting the Palestinian issue, briefing the foreign minister on the outcome of the records contact regionally and internationally by the Palestinian Authority, as both sides stressed the significance of continuing coordination with the American side and other international organizations to push forward the peace process. The United Nations Human Rights Office said on Friday that an 18-month sentence handed down to an Israeli soldier for killing a wounded and unarmed Palestinian was excessively lenient and unacceptable. The soldier who killed a wounded Palestinian in March 2016 was sentenced to 18 months imprisonment on Tuesday in a show of leniency that drew Palestinian outrage after one of the most divisive trials in Israeli history. On Wednesday, the Arab League condemned an Israeli court sentence of 18 months in prison for a soldier who shot dead a wounded Palestinian, saying it reflected racism. Elite Iraqi forces on Friday entered a West Mosul neighborhood for the first time since the start 4 months ago of an offensive to retake the city. Iraqi forces secured the east side of Mosul a month ago and on Sunday launched a fresh push on the west side of the Tigris River that divides the city. They have since retaken 7 outlying villages and desert areas near the city. On Friday, commanders confirmed that government forces had full control of the airport that lies on the southern edge of the city.
Right, welcome back, and let me welcome our distinguished guest first, Dr. Ibrahim Ghazawi, political analyst. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll continue with our discussion, of course, of last week, but with special emphasis on special files. Before we continue on with our discussion, let me first have this quick report and the Geneva talks on Syria, and we'll come back for discussion.
The UN Syria envoy called on the war-torn nations' rival sides to meet their historic responsibility and seek a deal to end the 6-year conflict. The negotiations at the United Nations in Geneva formally opened with envoy Staffan de Mistura dampening hopes of a breakthrough. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's negotiators are meeting the opposition for a 4th round of UN broker talks, clouded by persistent violence and deadlock over the country's political future. The main opposition High Negotiator Committee, the HNC, has said it wants to meet the government face-to-face. 2 other opposition groups based in Moscow and Cairo, who are also in the South City, also want a seat at the table, but the HNC has insisted it should remain the only rebel delegation. De Mistura said his dream was to have one opposition grouping, but noted that key divisions persist, especially over Assad's fate. The HNC has demanded Assad leave from office as part of any deal, while the Moscow and Cairo groups have a more moderate stance on the Syrian leader.
Right, welcome back, and we'll go right away with our discussion, and this time we'll speak about the UN-Arab relations with emphasis to special files. If we start with Syria, because Syria is now at its peak, as we say, as the Geneva talks are ongoing. This is, I guess, maybe the 4th or the 5th time that they try to sit together. Up till this minute, we have no information of both sides will really sit. I'm speaking about the government, of course, and the opposition would sit face to face. How do you read the Geneva talks and the efforts of the UN in this domain?
Well, it looks like there is something positive, which is very tiny, because after long, bloody 6 years of direct and indirect confrontations between warring militias and the existing regime in Syria, at last we have good news that they agreed to sit together after 6 years. This is really catastrophic, because we talk about a big country like Syria, tens of millions of refugees and a lot of problems, and at the end we have some negative, of course, negative efforts at the last couple of years trying to put, the opposition and the regime together in one table to negotiate their future. Hopefully this will work out. The thing that I really think it's positive is the conviction of the different partners of the Syrian cause that there is no military solution to the situation there. Luckily, this happened after the regime is a little bit stronger than it was before, because this is the only guarantee to keep Syria united. This is should be the main concern, not only for Egypt, but for all the Arab countries indeed, because the threat of fragmented Syria is really a very black image for the future, not only of Syria, but the future of the whole region. So when we today talk about opposition leaders and the regime representatives agreeing to sit together on the same negotiation table, well, in itself it's not a big deal, but considering the environment, it's a good move. Hopefully this will not be taken for long by this achievement, which I don't think it's a big achievement in itself. The real achievement is two things indeed. The main players in the region, Arab countries, should be convinced that there is no military solution to the situation in Syria and stop intervening into Syria indirectly. The other thing is the Syrian partners themselves, they have to be merciful about their own people. I should not expect the world outside to be loving me while I'm killing my people. inside Syria. This is not only the regime I'm talking to, it's all the opposition parties or partners, because they all use the weapons, they all fighting, they are all shedding blood. So now when we talk about Syria, we talk about a concern that should be not only for the regime, it should be for all Syrians. The real Syrians indeed, because as we know, a lot of non-Syrian combatants are there in Syria today for years. For whom they are warring, I don't know. Probably regional powers, probably international powers, but whoever they are fighting for.
Probably both.
Both of them, but whoever it is, or whatever it is, it's not the interest of the Arab world, unfortunately.
Definitely. If we look at the Syrian file from a broader picture, and you spoke about main players, the Arab ones? No. We're speaking about the international ones, who are the main players in the Syrian action, and I guess the co-main ones are the regional ones. But if we look at this crisis, because it is a crisis by all means, now there is a change in the administration of the US, there is a change in the UN Secretary General, who is on his part strong enough to announce some of his position towards some files in a very strong way, and maybe sometimes opposing to the will of big powers. How do you read here the Syrian crisis at a time when there is a change in the US regime and the UN leadership? And would this really reflect on this particular crisis in itself?
Yes, indeed. And let me start with telling the fact that the absence of real Arab tool for resolving our problems is the only thing that has given an ambitious space for international powers to play in our league. This is our big problem today. Why are we linking the move to United States or Russia? This is the main question. Is Syria a Russian concern or American concern? This is another question. The third one, what the UN can do indeed in itself, and the answer is so negative indeed. Well, I do agree with new Secretary General in his positive vision of the future, according to what he stated about the situation in the region and Syria.
And his strongest was the one concerning, of course, the Palestinian
the Palestinian cause. But historically, I don't find a strong ground to realistically support or think that he's going to be able to do anything, especially when it comes to Palestine and Israel. So let us be more realistic about that. The real change would not happen from the UN or the US or Russia. The real change, the positive real change, would start in the Arab world internally. If we really want this change to come as we hope it comes. I mean, yes, of course, the international powers have their own interests, and they might fight to bring about these solutions to the limit or the details that concern them at first, not to our interests.
How are things being pushed on the grounds that can really emphasize the talks in Geneva? And I mean here in 2 days, just 2 days, 94 people killed in Syria on the ground, in suicide attacks, in attacks, blasts, and all this. 2 consecutive days of suicide attacks killed 94 people, of course injuring other dozens, if not hundreds.
Hundreds, yes.
or how is this reflecting on the talks? What is meant by such attacks at this particular time? Who intends to show what?
Well, that's really a good question, which is so tough to answer, because in reality there, although the regime controls large parts of Syria, but also militias controlling another large parts of Syria. Strategically and in terms of power balance on the ground, when suicidal attacks happen, it means that the opposition is showing off. This is a message. They want to tell that they can manipulate the security situation on the ground. Of course, the regime tactics and tools are so visible, whether it take the shape of aerial attacks or ground attacks or whatever. The Syrian regime activities on the ground are so visible to everyone. So whatever they do, it's so clear that it can be identified immediately. The thing that is very invisible or vague on the ground is the militias, because they hit and run in some places, and in some other places they control it totally. Anyway, I'm not so worried about this recent events, and of course we all regret the blood, and whether for those who were killed or wounded. But I mean, on reality, in the last couple of months, the regime is stronger. Even Turkey position on the Syrian situation has shifted a little to get closer to Russia. And probably we talked about that in a prior episode of this program, and I told you that Russia has the main concern and the largest interest of the international powers and even regional powers to keep Syria united, because Syria is for Russia historically, and this is the last footstep for Russia in the region. They don't have any other place to exercise the superpower influence on the ground.
It's their just foot in the Middle East.
In the Middle East. So it's so naive to think that Russia is so easy going to relinquish parts of Syria to some other partners. This is how logic imposes the situation on the ground.
Right, but that would also create a big question mark. What will happen with the Kurds? Because yes, definitely that Turkey is positioned towards the Syria has been shifting towards or leaning towards what Russia wants, but at the same time there is this important issue of the Kurds, and how would Turkey deal and how would Russia deal, and what would be the United States position towards those
well, we have to realize today that some of the hidden lines of controlling the situation in Syria regionally, one of the main threats are the Turkish one. An explanation to this closeness between Turkey and Russia recently has two reasons indeed, in reality. One of them is Turkey was let down by United States after the failed trial of coup that happened a few months ago, because the United States did not accept or agree to surrender the main accused person, Abdullah Gulen, to Turkey. And that had witnessed sort of crack in the relations between the two big countries, regional and international power. Other thing is the closeness that happened recently between Russia and Turkey, even after the successful assassination, of the Russian ambassador in Turkey, which was really, at that time, has raised a lot of question marks, although the ambassador was killed in Turkey, but it didn't affect at all the growing warm relations between the two.
Raised many question marks about who Mr. Erdogan is using for securing his own ambassadors, rather his own country right now.
Exactly. So even this, even though this happened and was so dramatic and so, in terms of diplomacy, it was a real disaster, but it has passed peacefully without problems there.
For the time being.
Yeah, for the time being. At that time, well, it was clear that there is something behind the scene. I think the other issue, which is so crucial for both Russia and Turkey, is to agree on Syria's future. And one of the balancing points is the Kurds situation, whether in Turkey or in Syria or in Iraq. So I'm quite sure that they have reached sort of agreement on the future of these issues, especially in Syria, and how this issue will be dealt with in future should the existing regime continues, which most probably will happen, even in a transitional period of time, of course, and even in future, after change of the regime, if we suppose that peaceful talks will take us to a stable situation or more secure situation where election will take place and we will have another administration in Syria probably within 2 or 3 years. Should this happen, there is an agreement between Russia and Turkey. Away from it, of course, United States of America.
But will include the United States one time or another.
Of course, in time, yeah.
And we move from Stefan de Mistura of the United Nations to Syria and to Martin Kugler and, of course, the Libyan file. And same importance, the Libyan file may be even worse, this time for the Western countries, Europe and other allies. Libya is more crucial than Syria. Syria, yes, from the humanitarian aspect. Libya is a country that is exporting all the illegal migrancy, maybe the reason maybe behind the infiltration of some of the elements, terrorist elements to their countries. Even if we have seen that most of the terrorist elements had the double nationality and they were already living there, which means an infiltration in their own security system. But if we move on to the Libyan file, and we've just seen this important meeting taking place between the three foreign ministers of Egypt, Tunisia, and Algeria, and an outcome with 6 important points. How do you read those new 6 points? Do they really differ than the previous meeting that took place here in Cairo, I guess 2 months ago, not more than that, and preceded, of course, by Sukhayrat agreement? And how different and how important was that meeting to others?
Well, how different? Yes, it is so different, while the essence is still the same. But the meeting in itself is different because it's so positive and it looks like wisdom, regional wisdom about the region is now taking place. What I mean by regional wisdom, I mean the main concerned partners or neighbors of Libya, when they convene together and meet and agree on a roadmap that have been previously signed between the Libyan partners or opposing partners in Egypt probably a couple of weeks or 10 days ago, this is a real sign that the Libyan cause is just going on the right track. When I said the essence is the same, yes, I mean that. I mean, we all know that, you know, the first point of importance to the Libyan community to come out of the current plight is, of course, to enable the sovereignty circles to be strong again, one army and one police. We talk about the cooperation between all concerned partners of Libya to get back to negotiation table politically and peacefully, instead of resorting to military or armed or violent confrontations between them. The real conviction that no matter on the ground, the situation of the powers, different powers for these partners on the ground, this is not going to resolve the Libyan issue. The only thing that's going to resolve the Libyan issue is to come together to the negotiation table and to agree that, you know, in their Libyan future, the only decision maker is the Libyan people, not the different factions there. So this was the essence of the agreement that have been signed in Egypt probably 10 or 2 weeks ago, with the presence of the commander of the Libyan army and the prime minister there, and the key factors playing elements of the Libyan political scene today in Egypt. And then later, few days later, the three foreign ministers of Egypt, Tunisia and Algeria, they have met in the Tunisian presidential palace with the presence of President Sipsi of Tunisia. And this really has a sign. It signaled a lot of messages. The first one is that the Egyptian move here was accepted by the other neighboring countries as moderate and just solution to the situation in Libya. The second one is that there is agreement between the real influential neighboring countries, which is Algeria, Tunisia and Egypt, on the basics of the solution itself. And the third message is to the whole world that we as Arabs, as neighboring Arab countries, are the main partners that should be in the charge of the situation in helping Libya to get out, not the international powers. That's why I said at the beginning it's so positive. So positive is that the vacuum that happened in our Arab way of handling the situation in Syria, now we are not letting it to happen in Libya. Because as I said before, this vacuum is disastrous because it means that we are bankrupt in Arab world. We are not able to handle our own problems, and we are convening international powers to come to our land and to help us resolve our problems. This is the situation, unfortunately, in Syria, and the situation in Palestine as well. And the situation in Libya was nominated to become the same, but luckily this did not happen. But after this top official meeting in Tunisia, because it says that we in Algeria, in Tunisia, in Egypt, we are capable of supporting our Libyan neighbor, our Libyan people, to get out of their problems through peaceful negotiations, through agreements, and through the 6 points that were mentioned in the agreement. Hopefully, our Libyan brothers and the Libyan people will be, you know, accepting and be
That
able,
is the problem.
Yeah, will be accepting it.
That is exactly where we stand. The problem is that not all the Libyans parties or concerned parties are really accepting the mediation of all those countries, not even accepting all the solutions that were put on the table. Now, if we just read here the situation, and we have here the parliament led by Aqila Saleh, we have the government which is led by Faiz Sarraj, and we have the army which is accepted by the parliament led by General Haftar, and all militias surrounding the other, or rather all parties in the middle. First, we had this consensus among the government and the army, but then it turned to be non-agreement at all, and then we have seen the parliaments accepting the General Haftar, or the commandership of General Haftar, to what they called the Libyan National Army, and though were not very much accepted to the government. Where is the core problem here that really hindered their progress or hindered their ability to reach what they can call agreement to the situation?
Well, thank you for the question, indeed, because it's really what the Libyan people have to ask themselves today, and the answer is only one. What makes this happen is the absence of the upper interest consideration for any party today that comes out and tell I'm not with this, I'm not with settlement, I'm not with peaceful talks, I'm not with sitting on the table, and I'm not with putting hands together to reach solutions out of this Libyan blight. So yes, as you just said, even though if there is some factions, some groups in Libya who might not fully satisfied with what have been reached in Cairo and even reiterated and reassured in the trilateral meeting in Tunisia between the three foreign ministers of the three countries we mentioned. Although it's a little bit odd for any Libyan partner to come out and say that he's not agreeing with this, but still we can accept this sort of non-agreement. I mean, as long as the agreement goes. Because we have
of course, definitely that was not really reported just
officially,
yeah, or officially. Definitely that was not. But there were some problems created even after those talks, and hence
this is normal.
in the implementation.
You know why? One of the main issues is that there are some smaller groups who are not so influential on the ground, and who resort to power today, to illegal weapons, to impose their presence on the ground. Of course, those people will not be satisfied with the agreement. Of course, definitely. If we think that they will accept that, this is so naive. Logic would say that those people will be entirely against any peaceful agreement, because peaceful agreement will mean for them immediately stop of their influence on the ground. So, I mean, if they say no, yes, they have right to say no, but they cannot impose their no on the whole community there. The main partners, the largest groups of opinion, decision-making levels, and those who can speak so far until today in the name of the Libyan people, they are in favor of. And we have to support them. We have to support them to sit together. And we have to support them to respect the roadmap that was signed under the auspices and support of Egyptian leadership 10 days ago, probably. Because really it opens a hopeful way of change within a year span. We talk about a maximum of last February in 2018, where elections will take place and agreement on the ground, and translate this political and peaceful negotiation into steps on the ground, which is really good. It means simply that we will stop from now, should all partners accept this. We will stop fighting, and we will enable legitimate powers on the ground. And the only power, and therefore their own interest in Libya, for everyone, the only power that should be allowed to have influence in the ground is two powers: the power of people and the power of legitimate army, because the legitimate army expresses on the ground the legitimate interest of the Libyan people, not the militias. The militias, they bring their weapons from nowhere. We don't know where they bring their weapons from.
No, we really don't. Anyway, this is not the issue, but rather what we really want to emphasize here. What is Libya for the international community? Meaning, does Libya mean oil, a country that a wealthy country of oil, or does it mean their own security? And which is more important? I mean here, how will the international community deal with the Libyan aspect?
Well, it's an amalgam of a lot of things. One of them, of course, oil and different natural resources. But if we consider the European countries, for them Libya is a large gate for illegal immigration. So it's a continuous negative concern for them, because unstable Libya means simply non-stop waves of illegal immigration going through Libya. So for European countries, of course, one of their main problems today is illegal immigrations, not only for the southern countries like Italy or Greece or Spain, the whole European countries, because they are all one united. So once they reach these countries, if they manage to reach the Mediterranean countries of European Union, they can easily reach to the top there, Scandinavian countries. So one of the main concerns is, yes, as you said, security and illegal immigration. And also we talk about the strategic positioning of this country. And we know that, you know, this continuous game of trying to impose sovereignty and control over territorial strategic spots will never stop. That will be always an ambitious plans for the superpower. So our problems now in the Arab world is to re-identify our priorities and to make our own decisions to fulfill the Arab people interests, not to fulfill the international powers' interests in the region.
And in that context, just to wrap up our episode, we are much waiting for this important visit. Tomorrow, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry is heading towards Washington, where he will be meeting, of course, starting with the counterpart and then to other levels, higher levels of meetings. They're preparing the ground for an important and much anticipated meeting between President Sisi and President Trump. The date is not exactly set, but it would be in March. How important is that visit by the foreign minister? What would be the topics on his agenda, or what would be the topics of Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry delivering there in the United States?
Well, the relations between United States and Egypt, from our own side of the Egyptian perspective, we talk about strategic and continuous relations, and should be always in very good shape indeed, for many reasons. On top of them is that the United States is a key player in the international politics and the superpower, and we can learn and we can benefit a lot from good cooperation and continuous talks in warm relations with the United States. Of course, the negative impact of the previous administration concerning our main issues and causes in the Arab world, in the Middle East region indeed, or the Arab world, and to be more exact, of course has left some sort of disappointment in the Arab world, because all the good words, just the sweet words of ex-President Barack Obama that was said in many occasions, starting from Cairo University in his famous Assalamu alaikum speech in Cairo at that time, all of these sweet words have gone in vain. We have never witnessed any positive change in the Palestinian cause. And even the other problems in the region, they have escalated. So we have now another chance of administration change. And although I do disagree with a lot of political analysts who might see negative change with the coming of Trump administration to the power in America, I see this positive. Positive because, not only because Trump's attitude as a person, he's more frank and more able to express his own views openly, which is much better than, you know, smiling at my face and you have something else in your mind. When they interpret this into institutional structure, like U.S. politics on the ground, you will witness the same policies, which is a little bit more frank in terms of handling the situations. When President Trump expressed that he's going to change the tools and mechanisms of American involvement in Middle East, and when he declared just yesterday in an open speech in one of the American states, probably Minnesota, as long as I remember, and he said that United States, and he was so sorry to say that the United States has spent more than $6 trillion in the Middle East, and we are not very close to the Middle East, and he regrets this amount of money spent in the region.
Yes, but that also raises a big question mark. Then what? How to compensate what he what he claims to be losses? Because honestly speaking,
he didn't mention what he got.
We only wish to know where the oil of Iraq went throughout all these years.
Not only Iraq, where the money of Gulf countries and the money of the Arab region.
Yes, definitely. So I guess that we have to be a little bit cautious about what Mr. Trump is speaking about here. But what are exactly the files Mr. Sameh Shukri will be raising there to be just the topics or the agenda of the talks?
We have concerns and we have variables. One of the stable issues that we should rely and we should cooperate on each other, and that is the economic, the education, the culture. This has an endless potentials for positive cooperation with the United States, and this has to be deepened indeed. And we have to remember that a lot of things, positive things, happened through the American involvement, not in Egypt, educationally, culturally, in many cases, and there are a lot of open ways to deepen this mutually. This is one. The other thing about strategically about the main Middle East issues, and on top of them Palestinian cause, I think we need today to reiterate to the fact that we as Arabs have to express unified stance about the Palestinian cause as it was before. That the two countries or two states solution should be again given a stronger image again. And I hope that the administration of President Trump is strong enough to emphasize on just solution and balance and different politics of the international powers in the region. And Egypt is an influential country, and Egypt today is taking on stronger and stronger situations and stances as we get stronger internally, because Egypt today is much more stable than a year ago. Economically, we are stronger. In terms of security and military, we are stronger. Egypt today is able more to play the regional role in more influential and effective way, of course with the support of United States and other international powers.
Yes, definitely. I guess we'll be waiting to see the outcome of the meetings and what to assess after this. Dr. Ibrahim Ghazawi, political as usual, many thanks for being with us and for your input.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And dear viewers, many thanks for watching. Next Saturday would be another Arab Affairs. Until then, goodbye. Minister of Investment and International Cooperation Sahar Nasr participated in the 3rd Egyptian-Lebanese Business Council in Lebanese capital Beirut. In her address to the meeting, the minister expressed keenness on attending the forum, which represents the aspirations of the two countries to create new mechanisms to achieve developments. She said the forum is a chance to discuss initiatives to integrate the council in the two countries' higher joint committees. During her visit, Minister Nasr tackled preparations for the 8th round of the Joint Higher Committee with Ra'ed Khouri, the Lebanese Minister of Trade and Economy. The committee will take place in March and will be headed by Egyptian and Lebanese prime ministers. It is expected to tackle means of enhancing economic cooperation between the two countries. Nasser said the committee will also tackle removing all obstacles that hinder increasing the volume of trade exchange between the two countries. Inaugurated by Lebanese Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri, the Egyptian-Lebanese Council is attended by 200 businessmen from both countries. Russia's Rosneft oil giant has paved the way for investment in Libya's oil sector by signing a cooperation framework agreement with the National Oil Corporation of Libya. The agreement was signed on the sidelines of London's International Petroleum Week by NOC Chairman Mustafa Sanallah and Rosneft Chairman Igor Sechin. Under the deal, the two states' companies will establish a joint working committee to explore possible cooperation in various fields, including exploration and production. Sanallah last month announced plans to encourage investments by foreign oil companies in an effort to boost Libya's oil production to 2.1 million barrels per day by 2022. Consumer prices deflation hit Saudi Arabia in January for the first time in over a decade, but plans for increased state revenues mean prices are unlikely to continue falling for more than a few months. Saudi official data showed that price fell 0.4% in Saudi Arabia from a year earlier last month, the first drop since the early 2000s, and decreased 0.2% from December. The falls were partly due to the weakness of the Saudi economy, where low prices have slashed the government's exports revenues and forced it to cut spending. Last year's economic slowdown pushed retailers and many other companies into discounting their products.